This guest is somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for a while now. We're going to be talking about tech today. We're going to be talking about faith, sports. Give a big round of applause for Yves Batoba.
Back in 2021, there was a lot happening in the world of sports. A lot was happening with Web3 and the blockchain. And I remember being on the phone with my now co-founder, Parker, and we're just like, man, there's something there, but I don't know if we necessarily trust the blockchain, right? I served on a few different NCAA committees that really sparked my passion into the business of sports and specifically athlete empowerment. Everything from mental health, financial literacy, to leveraging your transition after the game. That led me to building this company that I'm building right now called Vestible, which is an athlete investment platform. Athletes specifically are so responsible for stimulating the economy in the world of athletics, but they don't get to really see the full value of what they're even stimulating. And I said, what if there was a way that you could get athletes to a stock market, let fans turn into investors and invest in that athlete's career and allow both sides to benefit?
Yo, so if you're enjoying the Blueprint podcast so far, I want you to give a big round of applause for Josh David with CTC Mortgage. Not only is Josh a guest on the Blueprint podcast, Josh is also one of our amazing sponsors. And because of him, we're able to execute these podcasts at a really high level. So if you're enjoying the topics, the quality of the video, just the overall ambiance and vibes of the show, man, that's because of him. And you know, the reality is that there's a lot of different lenders that can help you get pre-approved for a house or help you get a mortgage on your, next investment property. But the reality is that Josh is a lender that shares the values of this show. He loves the Lord, he believes in education, he's down to earth, and he wants to empower you to make the right real estate decisions. So if you're looking for a lender for your next property or your first home, we're going to have his information in the description so you can check that out. You can also check out some of the episodes he's been on, so you can actually hear from him what values he brings, what makes him different, and why you should use him for your next or your first home purchase. And let's go ahead and get back into the show. All right, y'all. Well, welcome to another episode of the Blueprint podcast. Man, I'm super excited about today's episode. This guest is somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for a while now. Been following him on social media and finally shot my shot and schedules aligned and the Lord made it happen. And so we're going to be talking about tech today. We're going to be talking about faith, sports, investing versus sports gambling. God, we are going in on the topic today. So y'all give a big round of applause for Yves Batoba. Man, bro, thank you so much for coming on today.
Mike, man, appreciate you, bro. I'm just excited to see what you're doing with this podcast, man. So it was a pleasure. Definitely a no-brainer for me to get on here.
Yeah, thank you. So why don't you introduce yourself? I think you're going to do a way better job explaining kind of your history than I would. So why don't you just kind of let our guests know who you are and why, but they're going to tell immediately why I was so excited to talk to you.
No, absolutely, man. My name is Yves Batoba. Came to this country when I was 7 years old and started playing football, played eventually at Oklahoma State University. While at Oklahoma State, I started really getting involved in the becoming a voice of the athlete. I served on a few different NCAA committees that really sparked my passion into the business of sports and specifically athlete empowerment. That allowed me to start working with the Big 12 Conference, eventually with the University of Notre Dame, and then with the Miami Dolphins in the NFL. In all of those different places, I was focused on comprehensive athlete development, which is personal and professional development, everything from mental health to financial literacy to leveraging your transition after the game. So did that shortly after, started working in athlete representation, and then that led me to building this company that I'm building right now called Vestible, which is an athlete investment platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, how I found you was you would make these social media clips and you would take deep dives into like NFL contracts or like stats about the NFL that like people like just don't normally know. And so as a big football fan myself, I got so much value out of watching your content, right? And so got to just like, and it's so funny, like I would meeting with friends, like I would tell them information that I heard from you, right? And it's like it kind of gave me it was a value add because I got to like be an expert in the conversation because I was absorbing information from you. And so I love that like your professional experience got to be something that's a value add to sports fans. So yeah.
Yeah, you know what's crazy? It's a lot of it is just understanding the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. A lot of it, which changed again in 2020, but just this week, or I guess it was last week, one of our players on the platform actually just got traded. Right, so he gets traded to a new team. I shoot him a text. I said, "Hey, congratulations on the new opportunity that you're going to have. Keep this in mind. Article 36 of the CBA entitles you to get reimbursed for relocation, for a flight for your significant other, as well as any type of car shipping that you do. All right, so keep all your receipts and bring it to the right people at the team." And he texted me back. He was like, "Bro, I didn't even know that." I'm like, hey, that's what I'm here for, man. Just making sure that she got
Yeah,
some value out of it. So, man,
man,
I'm
that's
glad to hear that
awesome.
it's impacting people, bro.
Yeah, so go into that. Kind of go into a little bit more about this sports venture, this business model that you're working on.
Yeah, right now. So what we did is, well, to kind of give you a brief background, back in 2021, there was a lot happening in the world of sports, right? A lot of athletes
Right.
were being pitched these NFT deals, and a lot was happening with Web3 and the blockchain. And I remember being on the phone with my now co-founder Parker, and we're just like, man, there's something there, but I don't know if we necessarily trust the blockchain, right? So, we're
Yeah.
having this conversation at the same time the CBA just got renegotiated. Around that same time, college athletes are able to get compensated for their name, image, and likeness. So all these things are happening in the sports ecosystem. And I remember in that conversation just saying, man, athletes specifically are so responsible for stimulating the economy in the world of athletics, but they
Hmm.
don't get to really see the full value of what they're even stimulating. I remember being a
Yeah.
college student athlete and looking around and being like, man, here you have these corporate partners, these folks in the suites, the coaches, all these administrators. A lot of people are really eating off of the back of what we're doing out here on the field, and we don't get to see a dime of it. That was pre
Right.
NIL. So I'm looking at all this stuff and I said, what if there was a way that you could get athletes to the stock market, right? A stock market, let fans turn into investors and invest in that athlete's career and
Hmm.
allow both sides to benefit. Athletes can
Yeah.
monetize the way that a company can, and the fans themselves will be able to get an ROI on that investment. And that's how the idea of Vestible came about. It's an athlete
Nice.
investment platform where fans can invest in their careers of their favorite athletes, and athletes go through essentially a mini IPO, just like a company does whenever they go public.
Yeah. Man, that is so cool. And I think when I saw you roll that out, I was like, yo, that is one of the most innovative sports concepts that I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of people doing things around NIL in the college space, trying to kind of
Mhm.
like, monetize those things, but I hadn't really seen it on the NFL side. And essentially, you guys are making the NFL, like these players, almost more accessible to people, like to average Joe or average investor from an investment standpoint. We kind of already have that from a lot of athletes are doing podcasts now, and there's a lot of ways that you can kind of really get closer to your favorite athletes. But being able to have almost a vested interest from a financial perspective in their success is like even cooler.
Yeah.
And I think the comparison that I've seen online with you guys is you guys are kind of a almost a competitor to sports gambling. So talk about the difference, right? Because the average person who's going to invest, $500 or $20 or whatever the number is, like people are sometimes are going to sports bet platforms to do that, right? So you guys are
Right.
another way essentially. So talk about kind of the difference there and like how people should be thinking about like, hey, I could, take a bet
Yeah.
on a weekend or I could invest in their whole career. Like kind of talk about that kind of differentiator.
No doubt. Yeah, and Vestible is not a competitor to any of the sports betting companies that are out there. One of the biggest things here is we're federally regulated by FINRA and the SEC, right? So we wanted to
Okay.
make sure that we had those protections, right? Unlike Web3 and what you saw in the blockchain and everything else. But one of the biggest differences is, whenever you're playing fantasy football or if you're sports betting on a week to week basis, it affects, your winnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
For us, it's really like the performance on the field, on the court, on the track, in the pool, wherever. It doesn't change the stock price because this is a stock market. The buys and the sells actually do that, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
that entire IPO process that I talked to you about. But additionally, you can also trade on the platform, right? So there's a secondary market where there's a bid ask system. Somebody wants to sell their shares in an athlete. Somebody on the other side wants to buy it. Boom, you agree on that, right? So we're not some type of firm that's trying to get a pool of investment capital to to buy low and to sell high. We're not somebody that depends on the performance of an athlete, but we do believe that fans nowadays are more sophisticated than they've ever been before. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is like you understand schemes, you understand systems. If a player goes from this team to this defensive coordinator to this offensive coach, how does that affect his game? And you know that with the rise of the salary cap just continually going up, especially with these new media deals, that salary cap is only going to get higher. Players are only going to get paid more and more money. So we're looking for that ICP, that ideal customer persona, somebody who understands sports, also kind of understands finance a little bit, so that they'll be able to go in and say, if he continues performing this way, well, in year 3, when he's eligible for a contract extension, he's set to make somewhere between blank and blank, and then I can
Mm-hmm.
get a bigger ROI, I can get a higher dividend, right? Because that's one of the things on our platform is the athlete pays an
Yeah.
agreed upon percentage of their contract back to the investor. So they're getting that as a dividend as well as capital appreciation on that stock. And so it's
Gotcha.
really more of a long-term play, right? Unless you want to trade early, than it
Right.
would be if you were investing on a week to, or not investing, but sports betting on a week-to-week basis.
Gotcha. And y'all's first athlete right now, Baron Browning, like you mentioned earlier, just got traded to the Arizona Cardinals, was originally with
Yeah.
Denver. Is talk about the profile athlete, right? So y'all got him like earlier in his career because y'all know that like his earning potential is gonna only increase, right? So talk about kind of the process of what athletes y'all are looking at, and like when are y'all gonna add more athletes so that people have more options in terms of who they can invest in.
Yeah, simply put, athletes who are early in their careers have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
That's a customer profile that we're looking for. So in Barron's case specifically, he's a guy who was drafted out of Ohio State, the other OSU. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
drafted out of Ohio State, and he was a 3rd round pick. But he was playing inside linebacker whenever he got drafted by the Broncos. Very quickly, because of the defensive coordinator that they hired, they moved him to the outside, and here he is. He's rushing the passer. Well, if you ever watch the Broncos play, and Broncos fans know this, you're like, oh, this dude has one of the fastest get-offs in the NFL. Advanced stats
Hmm.
come out, and they're like, oh, he actually has the 2nd fastest get-off in the NFL. So they felt
Wow.
comfortable trading or getting rid of. Not they felt comfortable parting ways with Bradley Chubb. They parted ways with Von Miller because they're like, hey, here's this guy, and he's going to be the next one up. Unfortunately, he ended up getting hurt. But we knew that fans already had seen the potential of who he was, right?
Hmm.
So here's Barron. You get to invest in Barron's career, and you say, okay, here's the last year of his rookie deal. He's set to make $3.1 million, right? On the platform, if you invested in him, you're getting 1% of his salary that's being paid as a dividend. But if he goes out there and he performs, right, the same way that he just performed last year, now you're looking at him making somewhere between $13 and $20 million annually based on that next
Okay.
contract. So
Yeah.
then you get the capital appreciation as well as just a higher distribution paid out to you. So that's the type of
Man,
stuff
that
that I'm
yeah.
talking about, just a high ceiling.
Yeah. That's so good. So talk to the person who, like, obviously anytime you're making an investment like this, there's risk, right? So talk to some of those risk factors, right? So you did mention that he got hurt. So like if the athlete gets hurt and you've invested in them,
Yeah.
is that mean like, hey, like you're just losing your money, or is there like, insurance? Like what are some of the fail safes that someone would have, to kind of
Yeah.
protect their investment?
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. So like even whenever Barron got hurt this year, he ended up going on IR after week 2. But even though he was on IR, he was still getting paid by the team. Right. So he's
Gotcha.
still under
Yeah.
contract. And because he's still getting paid, the investor is still getting paid that distribution as well. So
Yeah.
that's, the biggest risk, of course, is going to be injury and what happens the rest of his career. Now, if he does have a career ending injury, God forbid, then in that situation, there is some type of insurance protections that the investor would still be paid out.
Gotcha. Okay. And like, how many athletes are y'all like going to be bringing on in the next couple of years?
Mhm.
And kind of what does that process look like? Is that just, hey, we just got to negotiate with more athletes? Is there like some kind of legal process you guys have to go through to be
Yeah.
able to have more guys on the platform? Kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, because we are a Reg A filer, that's the type of regulation that we use. Every single
Hmm.
athlete that we sign on the platform, you have to go and you have to get them approved by the federal government, right? And we can do it in bunches eventually, and that's what we're going to be doing here soon. So here it's November. By the end of the year, we plan on adding a couple more, but by Q1 of 2025, we're going to be introducing more basketball players to the platform as well, right? So we
Nice.
started
Okay.
with football because that's kind of our background. Parker played in the NFL. He played for the Baltimore Ravens and then
Okay.
left and started his own software company afterwards. So we're going to have some basketball players. Just yesterday, I had a conversation with 3 NBA guys that all think this is dope. Right? We talked to their business managers as well. So
Yeah.
additional people that got us really excited. Unfortunately, we can't release the names yet until they're fully approved by the Fed. So
Okay.
I'm just excited to let everybody know who they actually are. But
Yeah.
by Q1
Absolutely.
of next year, we should have about a dozen athletes that are
Let's
vestible.
go. Okay. And so talk about like what is the benefit for this on the athlete side? Like what are the athletes seeing in this as like an opportunity, right? Obviously we can see it from the consumer standpoint. It's a
Yeah,
cool opportunity, right? It's also there's monetary value, but also there's like an extra level of like, hey, I'm really invested in this player, right? I watched this
yeah.
kid from high school all the way up to the NFL, and now I get to like invest in his career. Like that's just a really cool opportunity for a fan. What is the athletes? What are they like? What in your conversation with them? What are they saying about this?
Here's what's really dope, man. So whenever we do a raise for an athlete, right? And let me actually take a step back. By the time a guy gets good at sports, I think you especially see this in basketball. You know, you're 15, 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's telling you how good you are, and they start telling you that you are a what? A business. Hey, act like a
Yeah.
business, conduct yourself as a business. Hey, you are you LLC, you Inc., whatever. So
Yeah.
you hear this your entire athletic journey. So we just went back and we said, all right, well, you keep hearing this. How about we allow it so that you can monetize yourself as a business? So here you have athletes selling shares into their career value. And the biggest difference is whenever that offering closes, right? So that day that the offering closes, 80% of the proceeds that are raised go directly to the athlete. So the athlete
Mm,
takes 80% of those proceeds. So say we do a $1 million raise, $800,000 of that goes straight to the athlete. So $800,000, I get to put that in an investment account with my financial advisor, and I let that cook. And mind you, this is before the athlete ever even made that big money yet. So I'm letting that
yeah.
cook over the course of my career. By the time that I retire in 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, that my earning potential as an athlete ends, right? Because I'm no longer getting paid
Mm,
by the team, probably not getting as many marketing deals either. But the $800,000, we know that over the last 30 years, every single year, every 7 years, that money doubles in the stock market. If I were to
yeah.
just put that in the S&P 500, it doubles every 7 years. So
Wow.
30 years from now, here I just funded my entire retirement when I was still on my first contract in the NFL or in the NBA. And that's the story that you're
Dang.
telling to the athletes. So when we're approaching to the
Yeah.
athletes, they're like, "Oh, this is dope! Like, this is
Yeah.
incredible." And
Yeah,
that's really the
it's a
story.
no lose for them. I mean, like they're that sounds like a win win situation for everybody. Which I think is really dope, and
Yeah.
I think that's just a concept that is revolutionary. And I'm proud of you guys for taking that on. So you mentioned rate like fundraising. So y'all have to fundraise for that initial like buy into their contract essentially, or to get that initial investment in them. What is that process like? Are y'all going to like institutional investors? Is it like, hey, you're going to the average consumer and getting $50 here, $100 here? Like, what is that fundraising process looking like?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have, so fundraising is interesting for us, right? Because we're fundraising. I think initially it was really on two sides, right? We had to fundraise for the
Okay.
company, right? July 19th was when Parker and I had that conversation in 2021. And we decided that we wanted to do a Vestible. By September, we had already filed the company and we started fundraising, right? So we started fundraising. And I remember still to this day, I drove up from Dallas and he drove down from Kansas City. We met in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had a full day of just meeting with potential investors and raising money for the company, right? And that was like drinking out of a fire hose for me because I had never been an entrepreneur in the past, right? So here I am learning about different type of notes and what kind of fundraise we're going to do and how much money we need now before we get to our seed round and before we get to our Series A round, and then how much equity do we give up, and at what point do we give up more equity? So all this stuff,
Yeah.
I'm just like, yo, this is okay. This is a lot, but I loved it.
Yeah.
So, we do that, get our company going. With the athlete, whenever we announce an athlete, so like with Barron, for example, one of the first things you want to do is you want to go to where he's at and where he's been. So we knew that he was with the Broncos. We're going straight to Broncos fans, local podcasts. We went hyper regionalized in the Denver community, and we went hyper regionalized in the Columbus, Ohio community because that's where he played college ball. So you go into the
Hmm.
alumni base, to fans, and then also just investor types that are looking for alternative assets. Luckily, we also had really great relationships with venture capitalists, hedge funds, retail investors, etc. Now, here's what we end up finding out. And hey, if this is getting too nerdy, bro, just let me know, and
I love it. Yeah.
uh, in the stock market, we do know that whenever a company is about to IPO, about 90% of the investments come from institutional investors, and then
Hmm.
10% come from retail investors. We found that the overwhelming majority of the investors over on our platform, about 70% of them, were institutional investors, which is great for us, right? So we can start pre-selling a lot of those shares to those institutional investors. They come in, they take the large majority of the actual raise, and then the other 30%, that's when we're going to his fan base, his social media reach, et cetera. And we're selling the rest of those shares. And that gives us a really good indication of how much interest there is out there for that athlete.
Gotcha. And so in that case, Barron's getting traded. Is that almost kind of a good thing for you guys? So now you get to tap into like the Arizona market along with his Denver market.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
more people know about him, especially in the Arizona market, which we've already
Yeah.
started stimulating a little bit. So, yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing.
Man, that's so cool. I want to come back to the fundraising and just kind of the tech world, 'cause I think that's a really unique. You guys are at a really unique intersection, and you think about just where our economy's going. Like, what are the industries in the U.S. specifically that are trending up, and like that tech bubble was definitely one that obviously was had to go through some challenges the last couple of years, but I think it's really going to rebound, especially with the president that got elected. I do anticipate that like there's going to be some more. There's a better chance of those tech companies getting more funded and having more success going forward. But talk about like how your experience as an athlete prepared you for this business. So obviously you have the relationships, but talk about just like what is that doing for you
Yeah.
guys, you and Parker, both as former athletes, bringing to this business model.
Yeah, I mean, look, whenever you're an athlete that really cares about the craft and cares about your sport and cares about your skill, you have to be ultra disciplined. Disciplined to
Hmm.
go out there and run extra whenever people aren't out there. I still
Yeah,
remember going into Boone Pickens Stadium with one of the running backs, Mike Robb, and we would go in there at 8 p.m. at night, 9 p.m. at night after everybody was already gone, and we'd be like, "Yo, we got to get these ladder drills in to make sure that
yeah,
we're working on our quickness, right?" Or go and get an extra lift in on game day whenever we knew that we weren't going to dress out our freshman year, right? So like things like that, that type of discipline, I think it perfectly transfers over to entrepreneurship because whenever you don't have a boss or you don't have anybody really holding you accountable, you have to be disciplined. And you have to
hmm
be able to go in and say, like, hey, I'm going to wake up this early. Here are the most important tasks that I need to do today. And whenever nobody's watching, what is it that you're doing? So,
yeah,
that was absolutely critical. And just the way that we lead our company, even whenever you look at our staff, the majority of the people that we have hired are former athletes or have been involved with athletics in some sort of way. So we have a guy who played overseas professional basketball. We have somebody who was the coach for the national gymnastics team in Peru, right?
hmm
And Parker and I being former athletes, and just a bunch of high performing people. One of the people on our team is somebody that used to lead ESPMW and works on our team now. So people who understand that world of athletics and how serious it is to be a self starter and get yourself going, especially whenever you have a company that is a remote business for now
yeah,
anyway, a remote
yeah.
business and a remote company that that you have to rely on people to be self motivated.
Yeah, that's so good. And yeah, I'm in the real estate space, and I've noticed some of the people with the highest drive are former athletes. These are people who are used to being uncomfortable, and they're used to performing at a high level and having that pressure and responding to the pressure, and then not like not letting the challenges of business and entrepreneurship really knock you down, because that's just something you're tested every single day. I remember I played college football. I played D3 at Mary Hardin and Baylor here in Texas, and they made practices way harder than the games. I was like looking forward to game day because I'm like, man, like practice sucks. You know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
just like it's
Yeah.
chaotic and it's loud and there's everything happening. So you get to game day and it's like almost quiet. And it's like, oh wow, this is like
Yeah.
this is awesome, right?
Right.
And so I think that those are microcosms for what happens in business sometimes.
100%, man. And let me tell
Yeah.
you, bro, there was a time whenever we were going and we were pitching to all these different VCs and you're hearing no so many times. And you have to go back and refine your pitch, refine your deck and all this stuff. But after hearing no so many times, you have to go back to your athletic experience of having a short memory. Especially as a
Hmm.
DB, whenever I played football, hey, I just gave up a 40
Yeah.
yard play. You got to have a
Yeah.
short memory and lock them down on the very next play, right?
Yeah.
So being able to get over it really quickly, you can't let your emotions get too involved from people saying no and being able to get to that next pitch. But I think one of the other things too is whenever a VC would have, some feedback or criticism, there was one guy in particular. He had a VC firm, I believe in Chicago. I'm not going to say who or what firm.
Hmm.
And we pushed back to the criticism that he gave us, and he got so offended just by us challenging, what he was saying. And I remember after the call, Parker and I we're just talking, and we're like, "Yo, that guy never played sports. Like he ain't never been
Yeah.
coached. He ain't never been coached
Yeah.
hard in his life." Because
Yeah.
we didn't even think that what we said was that bad, but we're just like, "Yeah, man. Whenever you've been coached hard, you understand how to
Yeah.
have tough skin and how to just keep it pushing."
Yeah, absolutely. I should have asked you that at the beginning. So you played DB at Oklahoma State. Do you have like a favorite memory? So I'm gonna ask you two questions. I want like your favorite memory of like, yo, this was like my favorite game, best game that I have. And then you talked about having a short memory. Like, do you have like a play in mind, like some athlete that like maybe like mossed you or did something crazy that you had to like bounce back from?
Yeah, man. So favorite memories was the 2011 season. I mean, that entire season was great. It was a year the best year in school history at that point. 11 win season. won the Big 12 championship, en route to beating RG3, who won the Heisman that year. We blew them out.
Yeah.
His first interception that he threw was against our defense. Oh, and by the
Let's
way, he
go.
threw 3 interceptions that day.
Dang. And
But
RG3 is one of my favorite players, so that one hurt me. I remember that one. So yeah.
that was a good one. We also beat Andrew Luck's Stanford team. Had an interception against him in the Fiesta Bowl. But I would say my favorite memory from that season, because I hate OU, was beating OU in Bedlam. It was, everybody always wants to make the big brother, little brother jokes and all that. And not only was it us beating OU, but the stakes were high because whoever won that game won the Big 12 championship that season. So we
Gotcha.
go into that game, and bro, I'm telling you, the emotions in that game were just higher than any other emotions because there's a lot of trash talk and the radio and all the pundits are saying what they're saying. But man, we went out there and we barely even had to throw. I mean, we beat them on the ground, 35-10, and then everybody rushed the field afterwards, brought the field goal post down. Fans are coming up to me and they're saying, "Hey, thank you for beating OU. Thank you for winning the Big 12. This is awesome." We go back to the locker room. T. Boone Pickens is in there, the biggest donor in school history. He gives out the trophy to Coach Gundy. Everybody's taking photos with the trophy. Man, incredible memory, for us over there. And then as far as the player, bro, the best receiver in college football history, I say that to this day, is Justin Blackmon. 2-time Biletnikoff winner, 20 touchdowns both seasons, ridiculous stats. He was my teammate.
Right.
In practice, he made me look silly.
Yeah,
I ain't even
I
gonna
can
lie
imagine.
to you, bro. So there was one day in particular, man, when he ran a post route on me that was so bad that, there was probably a separation of 20 yards between the two of us. And I'm like, bro, how did he even do that? One of his strange things was he never looked like he was running faster or slower, but you would just see him separate and he would just keep on doing it. It was one of the weirdest things that I ever seen on tape. So he goes and he does that, scores a touchdown on me, sprints back to the line of scrimmage. Okay, they're running another play. Hurry up, we're running another play. I'm like, all right, I got him this time. I'm about to lock him down. I get down in my stance. Bruh, not only does he get open again and score a touchdown, but it was the exact same route. And there was still 15 yards of separation. And I'm like, bro, how is this dude doing it? And I'm like, hey, I don't think we're playing the same sport. Maybe I should, I got to go and do something else, bro. Because, he was just different. But, Justin
Bro, it's so
Blackmon.
funny. Everybody says LSU is wide receiver U, but low key, Oklahoma State is I'll put you guys up there with because there's just been some incredible receivers out of Oklahoma State,
Des Bryant,
even just this year. Go ahead.
Yeah, Des Bryant was my teammate, right?
Yeah.
You had Justin Blackmon, who came in right after him. James Washington, after Justin Blackmon, he won the Heisman, or not the Heisman, but he won the Biletnikoff Trophy. You had Tylan Wallace, who was a finalist for the Biletnikoff Trophy. So, we're putting out receivers all the time.
Who's that kid that plays this year? He was unstoppable. He played Baylor last 2 weeks ago, and I think it was Presley or something. Could not cover the kid. I was like, what is going on out there?
Yeah, man, Brennan Presley. He is the epitome of what it means to be a Cowboy. Just tough. A lot of heart, a whole bunch of heart. His older sister actually ran track at Oklahoma State, was a good friend of mine whenever I was there. So we were the same class. But BP, he's really that guy. And I think he has a real shot at the next level.
Oh yeah, he totally does. He's got that it factor. And so I love that you gave that that example of when y'all beat OU and people were coming onto the field and really thanking you. And it's so funny because I think sports means so much to people. And I think sometimes people who aren't in the sports world don't really understand why sports fans are so passionate. And for me, it's it's one of those things. Sports allows you to a lot of times you look at the world and people we're navigating a lot of challenges, right? And so there's sports is sometimes the thing that you can really put yourself into to really have success through someone else's eyes, right? And maybe if you don't feel like you're successful, you can cheer for someone else and you can cheer on their success, right? Or it's that thing that allows you to almost escape, right, into a world of competition, right? And I think that's just a human thing that humans always do. We always look for that thing, right? So even people who aren't sports fans, maybe for them it's reality TV or movies or whatever the thing. We're always kind of looking for those things, right? So talk about why you think sports is kind of the next frontier in terms of obviously just a lot of investment, right, and financially, but just what is it about sports that makes this kind of the next big business frontier with kind of that human emotion kind of attached to it?
Yeah. So, I mean, there were so many things to say right there, right? I think
Hmm.
there was the president and chairman of the Miami Dolphins. His name is Tom Garfinkel, and one of the
Hmm.
things that he would always say is that whenever you're running a business, you have to go and you have to do a bunch of marketing to get people to actually buy into the business. But with sports, it's already built. It's innately there, right? Like all these people are fans of the sport, and they don't have to you don't have to market to them as much simply because
Hmm.
like fandom really runs deep. So even in
Yeah.
building this business, like the fandom already existed. All we're doing is trying to activate, those fans who
Yeah.
already exist and getting exposure, right? So what you're seeing though right now is the asset class that is sports has turned into a
Hmm.
new market, right? Sports right now are completely uncorrelated with the traditional market as an alternative asset. And you can invest beyond public markets, and you can even capitalize on market inefficiencies, right? This new asset class offers the possibility of earning excess returns in a still inefficient marketplace. I think recently Morgan Stanley just announced that they're coming out with an index fund where you can invest into some sports teams. Right now, Tony Robbins is talking a bunch about how you can get access to investing in some of these sports portfolios, or at least adding sports teams, specifically in soccer in the U.S., to your portfolios. So you're seeing all these different folks that want to get involved with sports in a much deeper level. Unfortunately, you normally have to be ultra wealthy to even have a chance to get
Yeah.
involved in this asset class, and that's why at Vestible we wanted to make sure that it was accessible to the everyday fan. And the everyday fan now, whether you have $100 million or if you just have $100, you can invest in the career of an athlete.
Man, yeah, that's so good. Okay, so I found you from social media, right? And you guys have
Mhm.
been crushing on social media. I'm seeing y'all on LinkedIn and my email. I mean, y'all are just all over the place, like really putting y'all's
That is
messaging out
working.
there. Talk about how social media has impacted your business, and when you started posting content. I don't. I think I followed you maybe in 2022. It might have been 2023. So you guys had already decided y'all were going to do Vestible at that point. So was that
Yeah.
strategic to kind of build the on ramp for the business, or were you just putting out content just for the fun of it?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, man, I think that having a personal brand is so key, especially whenever you're building a company, right? Like you want
Hmm.
to be able to at least convert some of the people that like you individually, right, to your
Yeah.
company and to your business as well. But whenever it came to social media specifically, we knew that we would be able to access some of the audience that our athletes have, right? So there is an intentional purpose in actually raising awareness on social media along with the athletes that are on the platform. So that's number one. But I think secondly, one thing that kind of threw us off guard was whenever random influencers who we didn't even know would talk about Vestible on TikTok,
Yeah.
there was a direct correlation to the amount of users and the amount of business that we were getting. So we found one guy, Tyler Webb, on TikTok, who talked about
Hmm.
Vestible. The TikTok ends up getting like 1 million views. It gets picked up by this page on Twitter called ML Football. That post
Yeah.
ends up getting 4.1 million views, right? That post on
Dang.
Twitter. Next thing you know, Chris Long is talking about it on the Greenlight podcast. Parker and I both get reached out to on LinkedIn by Fox Business saying, hey, we want to talk to you guys on the show to talk about this company. So we end up going on Fox Business. We end up having an article written about us in the Associated Press. Like all these things came about from a viral TikTok. So we're just
Yeah.
like, okay, if we know that this happened, and I'm telling you, bro, I think there was a 800% increase in users that came
Wow.
indirectly from that TikTok post. So that happens, and we're just like, oh, we need to invest a lot more on TikTok. So we get
Yeah.
together with this influencer, kind of seeing how we can get him more involved. We ran ads behind that post with his permission. And
Hmm.
I mean, yo, those ads were just going crazy. I mean, some of the best meta ads that we ever ran was from that post. So we're doing
Wow.
that, kind of find different influencers, start running ads with them as well. And, as a result of that, we just started seeing more and more people come in really from leveraging the audiences of these sports influencers.
Yeah, man, that's so good. And I think what I really like about your content specifically, and as a matter of fact, I've sent your videos to some of my clients, and so I was a marketing consultant earlier this year, and still do some of that as well, along with being a realtor.
Right.
But I showed them and I was like, hey, listen, look at this guy's content. Like, you were filming your content on your couch, man. So like, it wasn't like you were like in a studio with all the super production. I was like, I'm sure you had a tripod, your iPhone. And I was like, this guy is just creating valuable content. But the piece about what made your content so good was the messaging. Like, you were saying things that were valuable to your consumer base. So it didn't matter that like you didn't have a 4K camera. It was just like, yo, like, I don't care what camera he has. I want to watch and hear what this guy has to say because he's adding value to me, right? And so I kept telling people that, like, hey, it's really about what you're saying, how you're communicating it, and how authentically you show up. Because like, you were just authentically storytelling about your experience, what you knew, and it was just very digestible, right? And so talk about that. Like, I mean, the storytelling element of this, like, is that something that you like learned? Is that like something that you've just innately, is that like a God gift that you have? Like, what talk about that development and kind of your thought process behind that content.
No, I do believe that good content and good information will trump good production. And that's one of the things that we discovered within our company. The less production something had, typically like the better it performed, as long as the actual content and information was really good. So, whenever it comes to me specifically, it was, hey, I had this unique experience from working in sports. Maybe I can put stuff out there that can actually serve others, right? So at the beginning, a lot of my content was centered around, hey, what is it that athletes can find out about that can actually help them in the CBA that they may not have known? So I started talking about all this stuff, and then I started, kind of breaking down some contracts, and then it became just kind of more fun. It's like, hey, here are some ridiculous contracts that you may have never heard about, right? Ludacris performing at halftime of the UGA spring game, and he had all these amendments made to his contract and all these things that he wanted to add. So like, just like random things like that.
Yeah.
But kind of, following other content creators and figuring out, really the start of the art of storytelling, but in 90 seconds or less. Right.
Yeah.
So that right there is an art in itself, because I love storytelling. I've written a book called Immigrant American. Right. And I knew that that's a gift that I had, the ability to actually tell stories. So I put that in a book format. But book format is completely different than a 90-second clip format or 90-second reel format. Yeah. So really, kind of figuring out and observing what other people are doing and trying to, mimic some of the same things. But you have to be able to engage people right at the beginning, because, whenever you're scrolling, it's easy to just move on to the next thing unless somebody has a really good hook that can keep you in. But that hook gets you, but what keeps you is the actual value of the information that you're putting out there.
Right. How much time do you spend working on your hooks? Like, is that something you actually work on, or is at this point like you just kind of know what your hooks are and you just go off the dome?
Bro, the great thing about social media being out there is I just look at other people's hooks that are working really well, and I just mimic that in my own words, right?
Okay.
So, I'll come across a video and somebody will say like, hey, you're tripping if you're not doing this. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So he's talking about, fitness or whatever it is. So I'll take that same hook and I'll bring that over here, and I'm going to say like, hey, you're not a real sports fan if you don't know this, right? So just things like that. So hey, mimicking is a sign of brilliance, right? So I'm just going there and I'm just mimicking. I'm trying to copy what works, right? There's no sense of trying to reinvent the wheel whenever other people have already shown you what success looks like.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you said when you first started, you were creating content for athletes, essentially. And that's actually something that I remember thinking. I was like, I could tell you were talking to athletes, because athletes are the only ones who really need to know what's in the CBA, right? I mean, like, in terms of like consumer, like, what is that? What am I going to do with that information? Nothing. Like, just have it in my head, like, So I could tell. So like, did you have NFL people in your audience like consuming your content, and were they like reaching out to you behind the scenes when that was kind of your original audience?
Yeah, I mean, just from working in sports, right? I had a bunch of NFL athletes that already followed me, a couple of NBA guys as well. So,
what was the position that you had?
The position?
Yeah, like I guess when you were working in the NFL, what were the jobs that you had?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So at Notre Dame, I was working in what was called student wellness and development. So that had to do with comprehensive athlete development. Whenever I was at the not the Big 12, whenever I was at the Miami Dolphins, I worked in player engagement. So, you engage, educate, and empower individuals to reach their full potential, both on and off the field. And a lot of that has to do with working with their agents, working with their parents, working with their significant others as well. So it's always been about like the total development of a human being and how that translates into sports and things like that. So I had a kind of a wide scope. And before that, by the way, interning in corporate marketing and corporate partnerships whenever I was with the Big 12 as well as Oklahoma State University. So, understanding the business side, understanding the personal side of it as well. So, and then, whenever you're doing player engagement work in the NFL, you're also helping out with scouting a little bit. You're helping out with operations a little
Mm.
bit. So I really
Okay.
got a holistic view of how a team works, especially on the team side and not the business operations side.
Gotcha.
So it was really tailored towards athletes, but also anybody who had any type of aspiration of working in sports, because I felt like I had a
Mm.
unique perspective in that, at the professional
Okay.
level, the collegiate level as well. So that was kind of the audience, right? That was the ICP, if you will, being the ideal customer profile whenever I was creating some of that
Hmm.
content. So I was kind of trying to look
Yeah.
at it in two ways. So now, whenever
Okay.
I do stuff for Vestible, it's, yeah, we're still trying to get athletes on board, but we're also keeping that ICP for the fan and the investor that's coming along on the platform too. So it's
Yeah.
twofold in that way.
Okay, gotcha. And I guess like that scouting experience you had is great for y'all's scouting for y'all's next athletes too. So I love how you
Yeah,
stacked those skills and it kind of just led you to this thing. And I love the way the Lord built that for you. Speaking of
yeah,
the Lord, you're very vocal about your faith. That's something I really appreciate about you. I read your book and just seeing the how God has used you and the experiences that you've had. And I wish we had time to go into the book because it was so good. And there's so many
appreciate it.
correlations that you said things, you voiced things that I had gone through at a similar age that you do, and I was like, wow, somebody actually wrote a book about something that relates to me. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So it really meant a lot to me because I don't get to read about myself that much in books. Like there's just not a
I'm
lot
glad to
of
hear that.
young
Yeah,
Christian black men that get to hear our story told. Unfortunately, so in a great
yeah.
way. So but I guess speak to kind of your spirituality, how God has showed up in your life, how He's guiding you.
No, it's everything, man. It is absolutely everything. I think, whenever I got serious about my faith when I was 19 years old. So this is
Mm-hmm.
2010. I gave my life to Christ, and I realized, just a couple years after that, was that I had to try to relinquish control of what my career was going to look like. And I still
Mm-hmm.
remember being in my apartment, being on the ground, praying to God. I must have been 20, 21 years old, and saying to Him, "Hey, whatever my career is going to look like, Lord, I completely leave it up to Your hands." Right? There's a scripture, I believe in Proverbs, that says, "Many are the plans of a man, but it is the Lord that directs his steps." So I had all these
Mm-hmm.
plans of what I wanted to do in my career, and I just surrendered all of that to the Lord. And I said, "All right, God, like whatever you want to do with this, you breathe on it." And bro, a couple days after I even said that prayer, the lady, or not the lady, but so there was a track and field athlete at the University of Texas that was the representative for the Big 12 student athlete within the NCAA, and she had to go
Mm-hmm.
train for the Olympics. So the deputy commissioner of the Big 12 reaches out to me and he says, "Hey, this girl is actually not going to be able to fulfill this position that she has. Would you be interested in it?" There's going to be you and three other guys, and we're going to have an election process. And I end up getting that. Not something that I was even
Wow.
looking for. I end up getting
Yeah.
the opportunity. Shortly after that, an opportunity comes about with the United States Olympic Committee, right? Somebody sends me an email, I apply for it, I end up getting this internship with the USOC that was fully paid for. And I'm just like, how did this come about? I wasn't even seeking this. And then the
Yeah.
very next thing was, I am getting this opportunity at Notre Dame because somebody vouched for me and said, "Hey, you guys ought to reach out to Eve about this opening that you guys have." I wasn't even looking for this position. Like, many are the plans of a man, but the Lord directs his steps. All these people are coming to me, and I'm just following the steps that God had laid out in front of me. So I go to Notre Dame. Whenever I was at Notre Dame, I remember I was working out, coming out of the gym on a Saturday. The senior associate AD sends me a text message, and he says, "Hey, I think I have an opportunity for you in the NFL." What? I mean, like, I'm not looking for this opportunity. It comes to me. So I
Yeah.
truly, truly believe, man, like doing a good job where you're at, you're right, working at it diligently, as if you are working for the Lord and not for man, right? Whenever you do things with excellence, I do believe that if you are a believer, you should be some of the most excellent people in the workplace because you're representing not just
Mm-hmm.
yourself, not just your family, but you're representing the Lord. And when people are able to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, this person shows up on time, this person is thorough in the way that he works," then that actually opens up an invitation for you to say, like, "Hey, where did you get this from?" "Man, there's this book that I read called the Bible, and it says that if I'm to do this, and here's how I'm supposed to do it," right? So I always
Yeah.
use that. I use excellence as an opportunity to share the gospel with people. But more than anything else, I think surrendering control has been a huge
Mm-hmm.
piece for me. Because whenever I was
Yeah.
transitioning out of the Miami Dolphins, a guy named Dan Marino came up to me and he said, "Hey, you ought to connect with my agent about athlete representation because I think that you would be great." Something else that I wasn't looking for, right? But just that
Yeah.
seamless type of transition. Every role that I've had, I haven't had to apply for it. It just kind of came
It's
about.
crazy.
And I think that's complete divine intervention right there. That's leaving it up to
Mm-hmm.
God. And, one of the sayings that I always say, work as if everything depends on you, pray as if everything depends on God. And that's just what I do, man. I just leave it all up to God. And you have to leave room for God to just breathe on the entire situation.
Man, that's so good. Can you speak to the surrender in the suck? And I say that because you just gave some really cool. I mean, like, whoa, Dan Marino, like what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, those are just some
Right.
crazy experiences that like the Lord just blessed you with. I think that's so amazing. And I think something that I've had great experiences where the Lord has set me. Nothing on your level, right? But just like opportunities where, like, yeah, I didn't have to really apply for a job until maybe a couple of years ago when I moved to
Yeah.
Houston. I was every other job I had gotten, it was like a whole old teammate or old coach or somebody vouched for me. Yeah, it's like kind of similar stories where like, hey, I was just like, hey, the Lord just set
Absolutely.
things up. And then now I'm in a season where I got to get it out the mud, man. I got to really work at it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's not always those like just like, oh my God, look what God did, right? I'm in a season where like, and I think a lot of people are in a season where like, hey, you got to really work hard, right? And sometimes it feels like, hey Lord, like what happened to all those blessings? Like what happened to all those all those opportunities? So like,
Yeah.
if you can kind of speak to that surrender when it's not going well and you're not getting the phone calls, you're not getting the jobs that you thought you were going to get, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Whenever you're in the suck, I think that's really an opportunity to realize just how blessed you are.
Mm-hmm.
Scripture doesn't say, blessed are, you know, the rich, or blessed are the prosperous. It says, blessed are the weary, blessed are the
Yeah.
brokenhearted, right? Whenever you're going through the trials, I always say this. I say, a faith that hasn't been tested can't be trusted. And
Mm-hmm.
you have in the book of James, right? It says, hey, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So
Mm-hmm.
perseverance has to be something that finishes the work, right? It matures you in a type of way. And I always like to say, God, what is it that you are trying to teach me in this moment? So whenever things are going really hard, man, you have to consider it pure joy, because you know that God is doing something on
Yeah.
the inside of you. And I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that where you're going is nearly as important as who you are becoming throughout that process.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm
So
going
good.
through something that seems really, really challenging, I'm just like, God, what is it that you're trying to do through me? And how is it that I can find joy even in the midst of this really, really tumultuous time? So,
Yeah.
man, that's always been my outlook, man. That's my process. And,
Yeah.
I always look at that as just a refinement, right? It's refining my faith and making it
Yeah.
stronger.
Man, and so last question for you, or it's kind of a two-part question. One thing that you are discipling me in through just who I know you to be through our social media relationship connection, is
Yeah.
you're a man who's leading your family. And I know you have a young family, you got two young kids, and y'all just had a baby. So
Yeah.
I know the sleep. I know you're not sleeping. I know
Boy,
you're trying
we
to
ain't
build a
sleeping.
tech company. You're trying to
Yeah.
be on social media, but you're trying to do all the things, right? And so talk about how you're leading your family through that. Because I definitely know that, as a man, like that's God's called us to build, right? God's called us to
Yeah.
lead as well. But something can be challenging trying to juggle all the things, right? So talk about how you are leading your family in the midst of these other callings that God has on your life, these other things that you want to do.
Whew, man, it can be really hard. I ain't gonna lie
Yeah.
to you, bro. Especially whenever you're operating on no sleep. I have a 5 month old and a 2 year old, right?
Yeah.
Um, I want to get real practical if I can.
Yeah.
So anybody who is having a hard time managing their time, specifically, time management is easily, I think, the most crucial thing whenever you're somebody who's trying to accomplish something or trying to achieve something.
Hmm.
I have what's called my 5 P's to the promised land. Okay. So my 5 P's every single Monday. I go over my 5 P's as to what it's going to look like for the week. And
Hmm.
here are one of my 5 P's. And please feel free to adopt this. If anybody is
Yeah.
listening, steal this. You don't have to give me any credit for this. All right. So P number one is prayer. I think that's the most important. And they're in this order for a specific reason. And I'll break that down. Prayer. That's my spiritual life. I have to be good with the Lord. I have to be and make sure that I'm being filled before I have to pour out into anybody else. Right. So that's my prayer. What am I praying about? What is my faith walk looking like? What am I reading and what am I studying in the Bible, right? Serving at church, things like that. I have to make sure that all of that is in place. After that, I go into physical, right? So we go
Hmm.
prayer, physical. What does physical look like? What am I eating and how am I training? Is there something that I'm training for? Right now, I'm on this big kick of lifting 3 times a week and running 3 times a week. Running includes recovery runs, sprints, and really long runs on Saturdays. Right. So I'm
Okay.
doing that, and then I'm lifting full body on those other 3 days. Right. So what does that look like from a physical standpoint? So here I am taking care of myself. Right. uh, with my prayer and with my physical. The third P is my personal life. Personal includes family, it includes loved ones. Let's make sure that everything at home is good, right? My
Mm-hmm.
wife and I, hey, do we need to put anything on the calendar? Is there somebody's birthday that's coming up? Is there a trip that we need to take here? Let's make sure that we're talking and making sure that our marriage is good. The kids are good, right? That's that
Mm-hmm.
personal. That's that third P. After that, it's professional. That's the fourth P. And the reason why that's fourth is because you bring yourself to work. So if I'm taking care of those 3 Ps appropriately and accordingly, then I'm going to be able to show up my best self in the professional realm. So here I am. That's like my task. That's my to-do list. I'm prioritizing what I need to take care of. Is it fundraising? Is it athlete acquisition? Is it going to be the marketing piece, right? Like I have to make sure that all those other threes are taken care of so that I can be my best self at home professional, or at work professionally. Now, the fifth P is philanthropic, acts of
Mm-hmm.
service, giving random acts of kindness. What am I doing? Am I supporting my friends' endeavors, nonprofits, their 501c3s, making sure that I'm keeping myself humble by making sure that I know I'm like this world doesn't revolve around me. There are other things that are happening out there that are much, much bigger than myself. So those are my 5 Ps to the promised land. And I say that you have to have those things in place and create deadlines on a weekly basis to make sure that you're keeping yourself on point, especially with your calendar. And whenever you
Yeah.
get that down, right, and it takes practice, you work at it on a consistent basis. I've been doing that since 2018. So as long as
Okay.
you work at it consistently, that's when you'll be able to say, okay, there actually is enough time in the day if I know that my calendar is taken care of the right way.
Yeah. Okay, man, that's so good. Yeah, I definitely I started time blocking like everything to the point where like I will put something retro or proactively on my calendar. Like I've already done it, and I'll put it on my calendar. So
Yeah.
be like, hey, I did that at that time. But yeah, I
Mhm.
appreciate you laying those out in that order, because that definitely it helps prioritize, but also it just kind of gives like a really mental a good picture of like here's the things you need to do. And um, I think there's a growth because at one point I had like 2 of the 4, 2 of the 5, right? And I was like, okay, I got these 2 down, and then now I'm like, okay, now I'm adding a third, now I'm adding a fourth, and
Yeah.
so I feel like I'm juggling about 4 balls right now, and I feel like okay, I think I got these, but the fifth one sometimes I'm like I'm dropping that one, I'm dropping this one, and I
Yeah.
think that the encouragement I want to give for somebody watching is like I'm learning to give myself grace and to be like, no, like okay, hey, I dropped balls
Yeah.
today, but like tomorrow I'm not, right? And that also goes back to we talked about being athletes. There's times when you get coached and they're like, hey, like you can make the mistake, just don't make it twice, right? And so
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
an urgency that I put into myself where I'm like, hey, I made that mistake last week. Hey, this week, what am I gonna do to get better, right? And there's times when I
Mhm.
even mess up again. I'm like, dang, and like I had, we've all had like coaches that are out there that are a little insane. So I had a coach that was like, you're either stupid or you're just not an athlete, right? And I was like, okay, that's
Yeah.
extreme, like you know what I mean? But so there's times when like you just make mistakes over and over, and you're just like, man, am I ever gonna figure this out? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I've chosen to believe in myself that like, nope, I'm gonna figure it out. So hey, I have dropped the ball here, dropped the ball there. I'm gonna keep working at it, and eventually, like I'm gonna get it right, and it's gonna happen, and then I'm gonna keep it moving. And so, specifically as men of God, I think that's God's challenge for us. It's like, hey, he's like, hey,
Mhm.
I'm gonna set you up. I'm gonna like, you know what I mean? Somebody's gonna call you on the phone and set you up, or somebody's gonna do this, or somebody's gonna do that. And what I need you to do is focus on the process. And I need you to focus in on taking care of your family and staying in the Word and
Yeah.
like doing the P's that you just mentioned. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the Blueprint podcast so far. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, so in this next section of the video, you're gonna hear my voice, but you won't see me. You'll see an error message. If you already know that on the Blueprint podcast, we care about excellence. There's a verse in Matthew that says, "You are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden." So we want to be a light. We want to help you grow your faith, build wealth, and make smart real estate decisions. And we just want to guide you and be great. So we want excellence. We want to look 4K. We want to be amazing. But we're also human. And so sometimes things go wrong. So I just wanted to give you a preface that for this next section, that's why you see an error message. We wanted to leave it in just to be authentic and transparent with you guys and say, hey, listen, we want to do things good, but also sometimes mistakes happen. So enjoy the rest of the episode. Man, this has been super encouraging. I appreciate you making the time for us. I really feel like I love that practical piece you just gave because that's probably the most important thing we talked about, right? that's the thing that I think anybody watching can implement that into their life. And so I appreciate you just being vulnerable and sharing that with us. Man, anything that you want to leave us with, any last thoughts you have, any shameless plugs you want to make for the company, any last words?
Hey, go to the App Store, go to the Google Play Store, download Vestible, right? Vestible. And go ahead, man, and join us on this journey. You can find us on social media to where you can kind of keep up with what we're doing on there as well. We definitely believe in being transparent and letting the audience in on what it looks like building this business, but also building a family simultaneously. That would be the last thing that I have to say, man. But also, man, the Blueprint podcast, I'm really excited about what you are doing with this thing, Michael. So, man, I appreciate you having me on here as a guest.
Absolutely. Man, thank y'all for watching the Blueprint podcast. We'll see y'all next time.
Peace.